effective handoff from our pre-construction to the construction. So how do we make sure we do this? And I realize that sometimes we don't have a lot of time. Now, I get that a lot. People will say, Greg, we're awarded something Friday and we have to start on Monday. Okay, well that doesn't mean you still shouldn't plan. What it does mean is you probably have to either A, you push back and you say, we got to do some planning, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, and planning for us is work. Now, how do you say that without laughing? For instance, I had one client go, well, we can't sell that to a customer, Greg. If we tell them we have to plan, they'll just laugh in our face. Well, if you don't think it's planning is work, it's hard for me to sell it upstream, isn't it? Now, if I am simply just checking the boxes, like we mentioned before, I would agree with you that that's not planning. If we are actually doing pre-construction the way I'm going to show you in a moment, I could make that argument that, oh yeah, now I can see there's a lot of sweat equity that's expended. On the other hand, I'm a realist, as I've said many times. You have certain customers that tell you, you will be out here on Monday. Okay? Well, that still doesn't mean you should forsake planning. What it does mean is you run in parallel. So we're going to start, we're going to put up the silt fence, but we're going to do the planning while we're doing some of that generic stuff, or layout. While we're doing the layout, we'll go ahead and do our pre-job planning meeting. Whatever that looks like, you can do this, but a lot of companies go, we just don't have time, Greg. We kick off the job, we throw a job book, and we go, good luck, guys, see you later. And we send it to, kind of go back to normal. That's what we have to get away from. So, the process, once again, everything we're going to talk about has a process and a set of tools. So what's the process look like? Guys, these samples that I have are actually in use throughout the country. I've sanitized them for obvious reasons, but they are examples. I have, if you go, I like that form, Greg, but that's maybe not as specific to us. Can you send me 4 or 5 others? Absolutely. Just tell me. Or we'll work with Darcy to kind of make sure we control the distribution. But once again, betting eyes, betting eyes, betting eyes. If you take it, my expectation is that you're going to say, how do we work together and institutionalize this? So that's kind of that scout's oath. So the estimator says we got the job, woohoo, we won. What happens next? I'm going to give a set of plans to my superintendent. They're going to go back, and my super or field manager is going to do their homework. So here's the plans, here's the specs. Go to your trailer and just read through them. I don't expect him to read it like it's the Bible or something, but what are we building here? Okay, it's a Publix in Sandy Shores or Springs or whatever. Oh, it's a renovation. Okay, all right. What did they bid this for? Just kind of flip through, get yourself familiar with it. Now you come to the pre-job planning meeting itself. We have the pre-job planning meeting. We follow up with any notes. We look at any, what I would consider executive team should be looking at the follow-up, making sure the follow-up is done. And then lastly, we have what's called the stand and deliver, which I'll talk about in just a moment. So, that's the process. Here is the actual tool itself. And I'm not going to read this to you, folks. This is in use in a company in Texas. And these are all the items. And you'll notice there's several pages. All the items that you could possibly have. This is not checking the boxes. These are discussion. You'll notice that middle one there. It says details and action required. So, for instance, how are we going to handle closeout? Wait a second, we're talking about closeout at pre-construction? Yes. What's that old saying? I think there was a famous guy that said it. Begin with the end in mind. Begin with the end in mind allows us to think about closeout during pre-construction. So this is the meeting that I just mentioned a moment ago. That's part 1. So we have a good collaborative discussion. Hey, I noticed on the plans, they don't have any details for where their refrigerator panels are going to be. Do you have a cut sheet for that? No, let me get that. We put it on the action plan. Hey, where are we with the permit? Well, they're in their third iteration. We should have the permit 2 weeks from now. Got it. Those are the things we capture on this. And once again, every meeting we have for pre-construction follows the same theme. So, you heard me say the item up here, the stand and deliver. So, there is a process here that at the end, how do I make sure that this project isn't something that we just went through the motions on? Well, the stand and deliver is like the backstop in baseball. No foul ball can get by a backstop, usually, unless it's popped up really high. But the idea is we take that project manager and superintendent and we go through some of these key areas. The project team is the PM and super. They're presenting back to senior management and saying, okay, we went through and this is our strategy for our main project risk areas, our main trade partner risks, our labor projection, assuming we have any, our general conditions, any customer, how are we going to make this customer a raving fan? It's my job as the PM and super to present to senior management. So Rice, John, Channing. Their job as senior management is to poke holes in our strategy. Their job is to challenge us and say, what about if you don't get the permit in 2 weeks? What's going to happen to the project schedule? You said that the painter is your biggest concern on this project. So what happens to the schedule if the painter goes broke? What happens if the painter doesn't meet your schedule? Do you have a backup painter? And you better have a good set of answers for that. The idea is we want to test assumptions. We want to make sure we have true collaboration. And lastly, are we all in alignment? And I'll give a good example of this in just a moment. Now, a lot of you are saying, boy, Greg, this is kind of a different departure. That's a lot of time. Yeah, if you do this right, you can't just check the box on this. You've got to actually prepare. I could make an argument, should this be reserved for larger projects? And the answer is probably, but only you guys can tell. Sometimes it's those smaller projects. I'm not saying your job is small, but you could say a 3-month job, oh, that's an easy one. Well, it's also probably nights. Are you doing nights? Or no? Okay. So, but if it was nights, you could say, wow, that adds a certain level of complexity to the job. So if I was doing the devil's advocate routine, I'd say, well, how are you going to work nights? What are you going to do? How are you going to get materials there? And just walk through those exercises. I was with a client in San Francisco. They're doing a project in downtown San Francisco. It's called the Tenderloin District. It's just a madhouse. First of all, traffic in California is horrible. Not that Atlanta, can say they have the best traffic. But I asked them this question. I was the devil's advocate. They were presenting to me, I was kind of a mock-up. But we got to the question of parking. And I said, hey guys, where are you going to park on this job? And the PM and the superintendent just looked at me like deer in the headlights. We haven't really thought about that yet. I was like, so wait a second, you're starting in a week. You're going to have, this is a $55 million project. You don't know where you're parking? Well, we can pay for parking. Is it in the budget? I just kept asking questions, and it was this just awful, awful feeling. Now I said, guys, look, you got 2 weeks, but imagine had I not asked the question. You might have gotten to 2 weeks from now and said, where are we going to park? Now you have crews of all makes and models coming with their hand out saying, hey, we didn't have parking, you were supposed to furnish parking for us. And now it's a huge hiccup, and it's going to delay the project, delay the start, you're going to have a lot of dollars, and point is, these are the things you want to game plan. The next item that another stand and deliver was a company up in Boston. They're a very large contractor, you probably know if I mention them. But they're up in Boston, and they were doing a tenant improvement for Chanel. With the exception of Miss Darcy, you know Chanel, obviously. The rest of us, men, I will tell you, whatever you do, don't shop there. It's super duper expensive. This store, the reason it's so expensive is because this tenant improvement, it was in Madison Avenue up in New York City, $65 million tenant improvement. For a 3-story project in an existing building was $65 million. So it was like, oh my gosh. Well, the team, the PM, they had like 2 superintendents, a couple of their trade liaisons kind of come up with this game plan, and they had a really good game plan. There were 3 elevators in this building, except only one of the elevators went all the way to the top. I can think of a good joke here, but I won't say. So the 3rd elevator was the one that served all the floors, except that 3rd floor is the area they call the personal shopper zone. The personal shopper zone, for most normal human beings, doesn't exist. But if you're Gwyneth Paltrow or some famous celebrity, you have what's called the personal shopper. You walk in there, you go up, and they go, oh, what's your name, sir?
Joey.
Joey, here's this shirt that I think you'll look gorgeous in. And they put the shirt, and they... So it's all these celebrity areas that have, you know, kind of, they're being managed and clothed. Well, here's the catch. So the owner of this company, he's the CEO, I should say, his wife is the director of operations for Chanel. So he had little, we'll call it background information that no one else did. He knew about there was only one elevator, and that served all floors, and the personal shopper zone was not part of this project. So the guy's name's Les. Les goes, hey, what elevator are y'all going to use? And the superintendent goes, the 3rd one, of course. The one that goes to all 3 floors. He goes, no, you're not. And everyone was like, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, you do realize that that elevator goes to an area that is going to have celebrities and dignitaries that we're not going to have our construction workers going up the elevator with a rubbish cart, you know, and be like, hey, how you doing, Miss Paltrow? You're waving to them. And no, it doesn't work like that. So what's your backup plan? And once again, the music, like the record skipped off, and they're, what do we do? So they had to come up with a backup system that had like a buck hoist on the outside of the building that served all the floors, so they didn't touch any of the elevators in the inside of the room. But could you imagine, had they punted and waited till start, and all of a sudden they find out the manager of Chanel goes, you can't use that elevator. That would have been disastrous. Which brings me to this case study. Number 1. This is the part we're coming back to. This is a bridge builder up in Michigan. The long story short, there were 17 overpasses. That was on a stretch called the Southfield Expressway. They decided to shut down the expressway, which is kind of weird. Could you imagine shutting down 85? All so they can do new construction. And then they were going to open up. They said that they could do the construction quicker if they gave them the whole road rather than spreading it out over like 1 or 2 lanes. Anyway, that's the project. The PM, the estimator, and the super sat down. They were going through their stand and deliver. I'll get to the punchline here. There was a point where the PM and the estimator did all the talking. They went back and forth. They had pictures and satellite views of it was really well done. Except the president recognized that the superintendent didn't say a word. So the superintendent kind of stood over here all by himself. Just kind of quiet, bashful. Finally, sorry, that's what I was moving towards. The owner of the company says, Mr. Superintendent, I want you to answer this question because I got a warm fuzzy here. I want to get a warm fuzzy. He said, how are you going to handle maintenance of traffic? Now, for you guys, maintenance of traffic probably isn't as big a deal, but it's those orange barricades and barrels that you see on the side of the road. For a bridge builder, this is kind of a slam dunk question. But what the superintendent said was, boss, I haven't looked at the plans yet, so I don't know how we're going to handle maintenance of traffic. The president sat there for a second, said, okay. Closed his folder, I walked out. And everyone was kind of sitting there dumbfounded, like, what just happened? And they went and chased him down. They're just like, hey, Mike, why'd you leave? We're not done yet. He goes, oh, no, you're done. Until our guy on the front line can answer that question, you're not mobilizing. I'm not going to allow you to start this project. And that night, they worked. They pulled an all-nighter. And that superintendent was chatty Cathy the next day. They actually went through this and figured out, and he goes, oh, maintenance traffic, we're going to have barrels every 15 feet, we're going to have barrier wall, and blah, 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 and we're going to have this, and mobilization, laydown area. But you know what? Would you want to deploy your resources if they didn't know what they were doing? I know you were in the military. What branch of the service were you in?
Army.
Army. I'm sure a lot of you followed the story of the Osama bin Laden raid in Pakistan. It was fascinating, and whether you saw the movie Zero Dark 30 or I read one of the books by, I think his name is Mark Bowden, and it was fascinating because do you know how much or how long the raid lasted? Does anyone know? If you watch 60 Minutes or anything? The raid lasted 37 minutes. 37 minutes. They had 55 Navy SEALs from SEAL Team 6, 2 K-9 units, and 2 helicopters, which is an interesting part of the story. Ah, did that destroy the mission? Did we fail and did everyone die and we didn't get us? No, actually everyone lived, minus Osama bin Laden, and everyone would say the raid was a huge success. But do you know how much planning went into that raid? People would say, well, 10 years from the time 9/11 happened, but it was longer than that. But they built a mock-up out in Arizona because the Arizona climate was like that of Islamabad, Pakistan. It was that very dry heat. So they had satellites and they knew everything about that building he was in, or the compound. And they figured out how many steps it would take. They knew where people were in the building. Isn't that amazing? They knew that Osama bin Laden would be on this floor, his son would be on the second floor. It was this crazy, crazy thing. But how did they get that? They planned the heck out of this thing. And actually, using Navy SEALs was not the first plan. They were actually going to use smart bombs and drones. And they presented it to the devil's advocate. They said, the head of the Pentagon and President Obama, should we use bombs? Well, no. What if we can't find the body? Then we're going to have no proof that we killed him, and then they're going to, live on in their mind. Think of something else. Go back to the drawing board. Same thing with ours, folks. We're not expecting you guys to have all the answers. We're expecting you to have an answer. And we can game this thing out and kind of have that challenging discussion. Folks, I can tell you the companies that have done just this process alone have transformed how well their projects perform totally. But you got to make a commitment to this. I mean, this takes work to do it right. Obviously, you need a devil's advocate or the audience, as well as you need to go and prepare. You're not going to get there doing the dump and go or the poop meeting like we talked about before. So we'll come back to pre-jab. Let's talk about short interval planning. Now I'm going to pick on my supers for a little bit. I see this all the time. Not at Benning, of course, but other companies. I go ask superintendents, how do you plan your jobs? Some people say, Greg, I got a big chief, not a big chief legal pad. Some people will say that. But they'll say, I got a dry erase board in my trailer and I put all the activities. Or I'll use my CPM schedule from Primavera or Project and I'll staple it to the side of the trailer. Some people have the legal pad. The worst one, though, is the ones that go, it's all up here in the cabeza. Got it all figured out. That's dangerous, folks. So how do we plan week to week? That's what this short interval planning is talking about. How do we limit those last minute emergencies with our tradespeople? Maybe it's our own resources. Whatever that looks like, how does this look? So the process, once again, we start with that. The PM, we document the first week's plan with the foreman or the superintendent at the time of the pre-construction planning meeting. So we're doing our first week short interval plan at the pre-construction planning meeting. What better time than to game it out right then and there. It's like in football, you've probably heard this, we scripted the first 30 plays. What do they mean by that? They script the first 30 plays in a football game.
There's no deviation, no variation.
Yeah, they're going to go out there. We're going to run these 10 plays, 20 plays, 30 plays. We know what we're going to do. And then we're going to see how the enemy or the opposing team reacts. And then we'll course correct from there. We can't script the whole game because we don't know what they're going to do. We may come out and try to be run-heavy offense, but they play that well. So we're going to mix it up. And we go into halftime and we come up with new solutions. You'll notice here the foreman or superintendent documents the plan on Thursday for the following week. So yesterday, you should have done some sort of short interval plan for next week. Why yesterday and not Monday? Why not doing the plan on Monday for Monday?
You don't have time to advise people.
Yeah, it's Monday morning and you're putting the plan together. There's no time for course correction. If I do it Thursday or yesterday, I can start to make phone calls. My PM can start to make phone calls. We can get those resources lined out and figured out who we need to show up when and how. The PM keeps the original, or excuse me, the foreman keeps the original, and then the other one's turned into the superintendent or something along that lines. They hold that original. Then we actually have the office. Yes, PMs. You have a responsibility here. You get that short interval plan from your superintendent. It says these are the resources, the subs, the issues. Now let's talk about it. Let's walk through your plan. I'm sure you talk to the office a couple times a day. How much of that time is spent proactive versus the reactive? Hey, I need you to call the sub, he's not showing up. Hey, I need this paint color. Versus, hey, let's talk about next week. What do we need to line out? Some of you are probably better than others at this, and you just have a gift for it. So here is a sample of a 1 week look ahead. Some of you are familiar with Lean Last Planner. How many of you know about lean construction? Okay, a handful of you. A lot of you probably have heard of Last Planner, which is the kind of the lean branded tool. This is a sample tool. You'll notice it's 1 week. You could have a 2 week look ahead. Now, it's a 2 week look ahead, but you do it every week, if that makes sense. I've had clients that do 3 week look aheads. Notice I say look ahead plan, not look ahead schedule. What's the difference between a plan and a schedule?
The schedule you acted on it.
Schedule you acted on. Schedule tells us we have to be done on Friday with X. The plan is what? How you're going to do it. So what subs do I need to show up? What crew members do I need to do it? And that's what this is. When I see people go, oh, my plan, it's on the wall. I stapled it there. It's the Primavera bar chart. And look at the run date on the bottom. It says like December 19th, 2017. You go, wait a second. So you're running the job by that? No. The rest of the job's up here. Our job is to take that, say, here are the mile markers we've got to hit. The plan is how we're going to do that. So this is a 1 week look ahead, and I'm not going to bore you with all the information on it, other than you're going to have a moment to redline this in just a little bit. But you have the primary work, which is the top area. The second area right here is actually backup work. What happens if something happens? It's a very technical way of putting it. So what happens if we get bad weather, if we have a permit problem, if we can't get submittals done? Well, that bottom area, it says, what subs do we need for the upcoming weeks? Who should we kind of get people involved? What issues? So this becomes the PM or office's checklist. Hey, I need change order 15 approved. I need the paint color chosen. I need you to make some phone calls, and that's where we put that in there. We document it. Now, some of you, as I said already, have been doing this thing called construction probably longer than I've been alive. And that's okay. But how do we train the next group of supers, foremen, to kind of figure this out? We have to demonstrate, once again, that Benning way of doing it. Whether this is too complicated or too easy, that's for you guys to decide. one of the exercises I'm going to have you do in just a little bit is Benningize this or take a starting stab at it. So we'll come back to this in just a moment. So this next case study relates to the short interval plan. This is a contractor over in Memphis. They actually have 35 superintendents. They're a commercial general contractor, and they build places like this Mercedes-Benz dealership that we have here. But one of the big things that we said was, how are you going to get 35 superintendents to all do it the same way? I know, yeah, my friend over here chuckled. Well, they had a guy who actually was an ex-Army, he was like a master sergeant at one point. He was their general superintendent. And he said, Greg, don't you worry about it, I'll take care of this. Which kind of scared the bejesus out of me. He looked a little bit like that guy that's the drill sergeant from Full Metal Jacket. I can't remember his name, he died recently. So anyway, he was a lot like that, but the people respected him in the company. So he was a barker, but they respected the heck out of him. So we created a system like that, and he gave them 2 chances. I'll kind of get to the punchline again. He gave them 2 chances. First, you get a warning if you don't turn it in. They all every 35 of those sheets came to him, and then he would check a box and say, okay, you did it, you did it, you did it. If you didn't turn it in, you got a warning. The second time you didn't do it, you got fired. And I said, wow, that's hardcore. He said, no, it's real simple. He goes, I demand this of my people. I will do whatever I need to make them successful. He goes, but you gotta follow the sheet of music. I can't have guys playing jazz music over there and playing rock music over there. It's our way or the highway. And he held them accountable. So we came back and I said, how did that go for it? He goes, you know what? He goes, we had 2 guys that I had to give warnings to. They're a free pass, and it was hardly a free pass. I think he ripped them a new one. But it was their free pass. He goes, the next time we were 35 for 35. But then he said something very interesting. He said, Greg, now that I have them doing the quantity, I want to focus on quality. And I said, what do you mean by that, man? He goes, his name's Bill. I said, Bill, explain. He goes, well, here's the deal. He goes, I got guys that once they figured out, they just wouldn't get an ass chewing if they started filling out. So they would write construction work, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, done. Fax it in or email it in or hand it in. I get to check the box, right? What he started doing was quality control. And he would go through, especially for guys that were doing it religiously, he would grade it. He had a red pen like he was a high school teacher. And he would go through, what is this construction work? I want more detail. He would send it back to them. And they would go, oh, someone's actually reading it at the home office. The next time they got it, they would write more details. And he would even write good things. He'd like, hey, this is what I want to see. And he'd send it back to him and say, good job. But he was getting it. Focus on the quantity first. Get the muscle memory where you want it to be. Then focus on the quality. Now, I know the knee-jerk reaction is, Greg, this is more paperwork. Folks, this takes 5 to 7 minutes to do. And we've actually timed it because we get the pushback, so we said, let's see how long it takes to do. And if you're a computer person, this is even easier because you just kind of move the boxes and cut and paste and all that. All that being said, that part where I said that Bill was giving feedback, I was a superintendent in my previous life, and I got to tell you, when I would have to do something and send it to the office, but no one read it in the office, my quality went down distinctly. Now, obviously, this benefits me as a field leader, but I can tell you, when I would get feedback on something, whether it be good or bad, it got my attention. And that's why that call from the PM is so important. Hey man, I got your form, let's talk it through. Now we're going to use it to run the business. Hey, I noticed these 4 things on your list. Let me get on it for you. And you see results, you're more apt to do this process. So part of this for you supers in the room is, you do this, it's a 2-way street. You put good stuff on, the PM should be giving you the answers you need, and vice versa. You can say, well, couldn't we just call up and do this? Or not even use a piece of paper? How do you make it to where we can train the rest of the organization? If I was just one person, you could probably do that. Of course, you could be like me, not writing stuff down. I live in the sticks in Land O'Lakes, Florida. And I can tell you, some of you, I don't know if there's anyone here who built that theater in Brooksville. Any of the guys here did that one? Anyway, it's not too far from where I live. Consequently, I live really far from the Home Depot. But I can tell you, Saturday morning, I'll kind of go, all right, I need to go to Home Depot and get my honeydew list, and run there, but I don't write anything down. What am I doing about 2:30 in the afternoon?
Going back.
Going back. Don't just think it, ink it. Write it down. We can have that phone call, and I encourage you to have good communication. That's one of the things we identified. But have a vehicle that allows us, sometimes when you write things down, it creates clear thought processes. So that's number 2. The third one is our daily huddle. How do we start off each day? And cutting to the chase, this kind of sets us up for making sure our trade partners actually have a plan. And here's your test that I want you to try. And it's going to be kind of funny when you do it. Monday morning, I want you to go back to your projects and walk up to a craftsperson from one of your subs. Try this. Just ask them a very simple question. Hey man, what's the goal for today? That's it. These are the answers you're going to get. The first one looks like this. I don't know. Wrong answer. The second one sounds like the right answer, but I'm going to prove it wrong. How much are you going to get done today? What's your goal for today? Just as much as I can, boss. Is that how you estimate, by the way? Do you just estimate as much as they can get done that day?
No.
I hope not. Now, you might say, well, Greg, that sounds, why are you being so negative on that? Well, if that person gets 1 unit in that day, technically, he was successful, right? Because that's all he could get done was 1 unit. The only answer that you should be accepting is this. I have to get from column line A to column line J. I have to put in 2,000 square feet of ceiling tile today. We have to lay all of the east side of the store. Whatever that is, it's a definitive goal. Could you imagine, we talked about Mr. Tim Tebow, but could you imagine Tim Tebow in a huddle? He's got his whole team around him. He's all right, guys. All right. Here's the play, guys. Score. All right, let's go. And they all kind of line up, and pretty soon the guys are just kind of like, standing there. A couple guys run to the end zone because, man, they want to score. The linemen, though, they're like, I don't know what to do. How do I execute score? The point is, and I know a couple of my Georgia friends in the back are probably saying, well, that's because you play for the Gators, so they're not actually scoring. However, the point that we have to be thinking about those, look, obviously we want to score in every play, defensively or offensively, but how we're going to get there, that's what we want to provide. And getting people to get that buy-in. So part of the process, this, by the way, looks like a very long process for something very simple. How do we start off? We kick off at 7 o'clock in the morning. I would encourage you guys to think about this in terms of what I call trade boards. And I have an example in just a moment. But give each of your trades something like this and demand that they huddle up and kind of figure out what they're going to do to get there. You'll notice this box on the bottom, if you can read it, it says, ask the magic questions. What this was actually a card that one of my clients created. It's about yay big, fits in your wallet, and it has those questions on it, the magic questions. The idea of how much are we going to get done today? What hurdles are in our way? So imagine you have the electrician. The electrician's there and you go, how much are you going to get done today? We're going to do 30 light fixtures, okay? But you looked at, that they should be done with the entire store right now. What's holding you up? Well, unfortunately, you're doing the dry fall on our side of the building, so it's going to hold us up. If I get the painter out of your way, can you get the entire store done? Yeah, okay. But that's the kind of discussion. I'm not a good actor by any stretch of the imagination, but that's what we want to percolate up. If I was a tradesperson, they want to maximize their output just like you do, because that's how they make money. So asking these questions, what safety considerations do we have? What challenges? I have a client that came up with, they put it on the back of their hard hat, the same magic questions, but they call it huddle. And the huddle stands for how much are we going to get done today? Understand the safety risks? Do you have the tools you need? Basically, it's a, what do they call it, an acronym or a pneumatic device to teach you these questions. Pretty soon you don't need the card that's in your wallet. What we're trying to do is get people practiced. This is the sample that I was referring to. This is a daily huddle board. It's in use in Nashville with a client in Michigan, New York, and it's customized, obviously, but the idea of what safety issues, I know you can't read that top line, but I'll quickly point this out. This says AM huddle. That says PM huddle. So this company does an AM huddle first thing in the morning. They kick off their trade groups. At the end of the day, they kind of get them back together and they do a recap. You know, all right, guys, how did we do? So if we said we're going to get 1,000 feet, how did you do? 1,200 feet. Okay, good deal. And then they kind of set the day. Personally, I kind of said, is that too many huddles? But they liked it. That's the part of this bettingizing that you're going to do. You could have something real simple on there. Safety issues, production goal. Keep it that simple. I have a client in New Orleans that has, they actually created this. You know, like the job boxes with tools in them? And I forget who makes them. But they actually created a custom one that the lid opens up, and in it is a flat screen TV, and it's connected so they can have this huddle board that they turn on at the start of the day, and they do everything. It also has the plans right there, so the superintendent can go anywhere on the job site. He's got his huddle board up, and then they just close it off and they lock it up at the end of the day. Obviously don't do that in high crime areas, but so here is the huddle board. This, we'll come back to that one, is an example of a contractor in Chicago. Basically, the long story short, they had to move 1 million cubic yards of dirt. They are the second busiest airport in the United States, second actually in the world. The busiest airport is yours truly, yeah, right here. And trust me, I feel it every week. The idea of this project was bid at a loss, which I recommend against highly. Remember we said some people chase the wages? Well, this is that company. Except they were working 24 hours a day. So I don't know what they were doing, but this actually has a happy ending. Most of my stories sound very bleak, but this actually had a happy ending. They bid it at a loss, and as a result, one of the things that they did do was the morning crew and the night crew had kind of a competition going. And they would come in the morning and go, all right, guys, I think we're going to go for 10,000 cubic yards today. You think we can do it? Yeah, let's do it, guys. Well, they would come at the end of the day and go, all right, that's how we did. Good job. What do you think the night crew did when they saw that?
Tried to beat it.
Exactly. And that is one of the reasons why a job that was projected to be a loss actually had a double-digit gain in percentage. Because they played this kind of like a game of volleyball. The night crew would come in and go, we have to beat that bogey now. And they would keep doing that process over and over. And if you've ever, I don't know if any of you have worked in an airfield before, but it is complicated as all get out. I see some head shaking back there. It is hard to do because you got all the security and, you know, I mean, just the cavity searches alone were probably, you know, half the fun. So this is the daily huddle. The third process in our loop is the exit strategy. So to illustrate this best, I'm going to kind of clip ahead here to this picture. The idea of the exit strategy is this. The bottom is the timeline. This line right here is the finish line. And by the way, this is the most, has this been vibrating the entire time? Or it's just my eyes, anyway. So this is the finish line. Most projects kind of come out the chute. They're going, they're going, they're going. They hit about here, and you'll notice that the line just keeps on going. I don't know if we have any math guys in the room, but this is a term called an asymptotic curve. If you remember from high school, asymptotic curve goes to the line but never touches the line for infinity. Now I know it only feels like some of your projects go on for infinity. However, you'll notice that this part right here, we say client's budget and expectations. What we're saying is we were supposed to be done, but we're not done. Remember I told you about my superintendent Jay from my previous life? And Jay had the 2 cell phones and the pager. Well, Jay had a phrase. We would go to him all the time and say, Jay, are you done with your project? And he'd say, oh yeah, I'm done, except for these 5 things. And you go, wait a second, you just said you were done. I am done, except for like 10 items on the punch list and my as-bills. We're not saying the same thing here. Once again, how do we make sure we get to here? So at 80 to 90%, we're saying, shout, stop, and this is that 2-minute warning. Put another way, I say this is pre-job planning for the last 10% of the project. Because what we're trying to do is that. Finish on target and be done. And how does that look? So going back just a moment, here is the process again. So determining when do we have this exit strategy meeting? I've said 80 to 90%. Is that too soon or too early? That really depends on Bennett. That's where you guys have to decide. And by the way, what is 80 to 90% of what? Of your budget? Of your schedule? Of the CPM? I mean, that's up to you guys to determine. But we're not actually saying we're going to stop the job. What we're saying is, let's huddle up, team. We get this moment to kind of talk about how we're going to handle the last 2 minutes of the football game. It's a short timeout, but we're going to figure out how to do this. You'll notice on the far right, it actually talks about the post-job review. I do not have a process map for post-job review because it's actually part of this, but the idea, I'm kind of doing a 2-for-1 here. The exit is getting, that's a finish line flag, by the way. Exit strategy gets us to the finish line. The post-job review is after the finish line. Hopefully that makes sense. So here is a sample tool for the exit strategy. We've got, it looks very similar to our pre-job planning because I like it to be simple. These are the questions we should be asking. When's the move-in date? Owner FF&E. Everyone knows what FF&E stands for, but if you don't, furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Point of sale equipment for Publix. When are they bringing their delivery stuff in? And what other things do we need to know about? Owner furniture. When is their open house or grand opening? All of these things, I'm not going to read the list to you other than to say we have a couple pages worth of items. Lastly, actually, we have this client. They're actually in Orlando, Florida. They build water and wastewater facilities. The reason I talk about this company is very important because I've used the analogy of 80 to 90%. Well, for you guys, as I said, is that the right one? They determined on a 20-month project, if they wait till 90%, it's way too late. Especially when you're doing a water treatment facility. I don't know if anyone's ever built water before. I did an ozone facility in Orlando for my old company, and you had about 6 months of commissioning just to get you to the finish line. So just when you think you're done, you don't just turn the water on and it spits out the spigot. You actually have to go through a lot of testing. So we started the process much earlier, much sooner. So the last process is this, the post-job review. And as my friend talked about before, the idea of capturing these lessons learned. Now, I ask all my clients this question about post-job reviews. And I'll say, do you do them, first and foremost? And I'd say probably 50% of the time, companies don't do them. However, of that 50% that do them, what type of projects usually get post-job reviews? Isn't that interesting? You guys are spot on. The bad ones. Why is that?
They won't know where they screwed up.
What happened? And I hear you, but I'm going to just poke a little bit for a moment. Does betting do more things right than it does wrong? Yeah, I would agree. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting here right now. So I guess the other question is, why wouldn't we explore success just as much as we'd explore failure? Kind of a question we should be asking. Not to mention, think about the tone this sets. And my client out in Las Vegas, they said, Greg, we do post-job reviews on all the stinker projects. That's what they call them, the stinker ones. And I said, okay. Could you imagine you get a call from Rice or John and Ted, said, okay, be in the conference room at 4:30 today. It's like dead man walking, isn't it? You go, oh man, this ain't gonna be good. You go in there, your defenses are up, you're anxious, you know, it's just not fun. Not to mention, how constructive is that? You know, we throw the estimator under the bus, the estimator throws the super under the bus. I'm not saying don't explore those challenging jobs, but explore the ones you do well as well. So part of this post-job review are all the things we're talking about: improving that constructive feedback, foundation for pre-job, leveraging our operational strengths, and mitigating any weaknesses. This is a sample that we have. And you'll notice some items up there. This is a one-page document. We huddle up the team, and we talk about what worked, what didn't work. So from a PM, field lessons, or field lessons learned and estimating, what worked, what didn't, and we have that dialogue, and we capture it, and then we store it in our Benning Lessons Learned library. Put another way, the Benning Wikipedia. So now I can go and find things all Publix or all movie theater. And this example is actually a client in Oklahoma. And they are only a little bit bigger than you guys, but I gotta give credit where credit is due. They have one of the most amazing lessons learned library. It's all on their intranet, and the intranet has all things related to, you know, if you're getting ready to start a school project, what should I know to make myself smarter? They have all things about good concrete. What makes good concrete? So they have pictures of good concrete, good form work. These are what they should expect from their tradespeople and trade contractors. All of those things are what we want to capture. And what they use it for is not only something they sell to employees, but how they train their employees, but also how they make for great client relationships. For instance, I work with a client they're outside of Austin, Texas, and they build hotels. Kind of your garden variety, courtyard, Hampton Inn kind of hotels. So they work with one of the owners. His name is Mr. Patel. He owns all of these hotels, and he's kind of the developer owner. And he has a pet peeve. And this room is a bad example of, actually it's a good example of it. If you look in the corner, you'll notice that your ceiling grid overlaps like that. Mr. Patel, his pet peeve was he wanted to see chamfered corners, or 45s.
Mitered.
Mitered, thank you. Much better way to say it. So basically, 45 angle, easy peasy. Well, the problem was he would come in to the lobby of this Hampton Inn, look up, and without fail, my guys didn't do it. He'd go, you did it. Now, as you can imagine, Mr. Patel had a lot of Patelisms. He had a lot of little pet peeves. Guess what? None of these pet peeves were in the plans. They weren't in the specs. Shame on Mr. Patel, right? Shame on him. Guess what? He who has all the gold makes all the rules. That was his pet peeve, and my client did all of this work negotiated with Mr. Patel. So who's the fault here? It wasn't until the 5th project with Mr. Patel that they had this. He walked in and looked up at the ceiling. It's not mitered. You guys screwed up again. Finally, one of the PMs said, hey, do you think we should write that down? Maybe put it in like, because what happened was not the same PM superintendent duo was doing every single project. So no one was institutionally smarter. Now, I tell you that because I'm sure there are Publix-isms. I don't know what they are, but I know they're pretty fancy because I love shopping at Publix. We got one in
They
front of
change
our...
from region to region as well.
Exactly. But there's probably some things that are what I would call region to region, but institutional Publix-isms. In my previous life, we built work for Anheuser-Busch. Not the breweries, but the distributors. And Budweiser, while all of those independent proprietors had different expectations, Anheuser-Busch is very clear. You know that born-on dating that they talk about? Well, you have to keep Budweiser at a certain temperature. So their reefer coolers, like, all had to be a certain temperature, a certain size. They weren't allowed to stack them. That was Budweiser's Starbucks way. And we had to know that because we had to make those independent proprietors smarter. So when they said, oh, we want just a 100,000 square foot cooler, we'd go, no, you can't. Budweiser likes this, and you're going to lose your franchise if you don't do it. Oh, okay. Point is, it's one thing for you to know the Publix-isms, but what about, you said you're doing Publix. I'm sure there's a handful of others in here that are doing Publix's. So how many of you are sharing that information and making all of us smarter as a result? What we're going to do now, this is perfect. It works out timing-wise, and more importantly, we're almost to hearing the end of the drone of my voice, which is outstanding, because after lunch, we are now going to work on some Benningizing, and as promised, we're going to open that bridge building business unit today. So you'll notice